Daniel was a quiet young man who lived alone in a small city apartment near the university. His life was simple and peaceful. He woke up early, made coffee, went to work, came home, and spent his evenings reading or watching old shows. He liked things to stay calm. He had no close family nearby, and most of his friends had moved away. So when he heard about a cultural exchange program that needed someone to host a foreign student, he thought it might be interesting. He didn't expect anything strange from it. He just wanted company. When the agency told him his new roommate's name was Lyra, he imagined a normal student from another country. But when she arrived, he realized this was not a usual situation. Lyra was from a distant colony where humans had only recently started cultural exchange visits. People jokingly called them aliens, though they looked very similar to humans. The biggest difference was in their eyes. Lyra's eyes had a silver glow under certain light like moonlight reflected on water. Her skin was pale, her movements slow and careful, and her voice soft, almost musical. At first, Daniel didn't know what to say. He had never met anyone like her. She stood at the door holding a small travel bag, looking nervous but smiling politely. "Hello," she said, in clear but gentle English. "I hope I am not too early." Her accent was unusual but beautiful in a quiet way. Daniel nodded, trying not to stare. "No, you're fine. Come in. I'm Daniel." She bowed her head slightly, a gesture she said meant respect in her culture. Then she stepped inside and looked around the small apartment with calm curiosity. She didn't ask for much, just a small room, a quiet space to read, and a warm drink in the morning. During the first few days, Daniel noticed how different her habits were. She never seemed to sleep deeply. Sometimes when he got up at night for water, he saw a soft light coming from under her door. When he asked, she said she was meditating. On her world, they didn't rest the same way humans did. They spent part of the night in half sleep, listening to the sounds around them. Daniel tried to understand, though it sounded unusual. He thought it was part of her culture, maybe like how some people prayed before bed. They shared small talks during breakfast. Lyra liked to ask questions, hundreds of small, innocent questions. Why do humans close windows even when the air feels kind? She asked once. Daniel laughed softly. "Because we don't like bugs coming in." She nodded thoughtfully, writing something in her notebook. She wrote often. Sometimes she would sit by the window, staring at the city lights, then write page after page in neat handwriting. When Daniel asked what she was writing, she said, "It helps me understand feelings. Human life moves fast. Writing slows it down." Daniel didn't fully understand, but he liked listening to her thoughts. She was calm but always watching, as if learning every detail of how humans lived. Still, there were moments that made him uneasy. Once, when he was watching television, he noticed her standing behind him quietly, observing his reactions to the screen. When he turned, she didn't look away. She simply said, "I am studying how humans change their faces when they feel." He didn't know whether to laugh or feel awkward, but she seemed so honest that he couldn't be upset. Over time, Daniel grew comfortable having her around. She kept things tidy, cooked light meals, and spoke softly. The apartment, once quiet in a lonely way, now felt peaceful in a shared way. Sometimes she would hum a low melody from her world, and Daniel would listen while reading. Yet something about her still felt distant, like she was both here and far away. Her eyes, though kind, sometimes carried a sadness he couldn't name. One evening, it started to rain heavily. Lyra stood by the balcony, watching the drops hit the railing. Daniel offered her a blanket, but she didn't take it. "Where I come from," she said, "rain is rare. We walk under it to remember the sky is alive." So Daniel stood beside her, both silent, listening to the rhythm of the rain. For the first time, he felt a quiet bond forming between them. Not romantic, but something simple and human. Days turned into weeks. They built small routines together, cooking breakfast, sharing tea, exchanging short stories. Lyra loved to learn new words. She repeated them slowly, like tasting each sound. But Daniel noticed one strange thing. Every night before sleeping, she made sure all lights in the apartment stayed on. When he turned them off to save electricity, she quietly turned them back on. Finally, he asked her why. "Darkness hides breathing things," she said softly. Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" "In my home," she explained, "some creatures move in the dark. We are taught that light keeps them away. It is not fear. It is respect." He realized then that she was not strange, just shaped by a different kind of world. Her customs, her habits, her quiet distance, they all came from a place he could not imagine. Another evening, he found her sitting on the floor, staring at a candle flame. He asked what she was doing. "I am learning your rhythm," she said. "Humans move with a pattern I want to understand. It helps me feel safe." Her words stayed in his mind. He wondered how she saw him. An ordinary man with an ordinary job, yet somehow important to her study of human life. Despite their differences, Daniel felt protective of her. She was alone in a new world, surrounded by strangers, trying to learn everything from scratch. He remembered how hard it was for him to move cities once. She had moved across worlds. When his friends asked what it was like living with someone from another planet, Daniel said, "She's not that different, just quieter, kinder." But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. There was something about her. Something he couldn't name. Late one night, as he was half asleep, he thought he heard soft footsteps near his bed. When he opened his eyes, there was no one there, just a faint glow under her door. He decided not to mention it. Maybe he imagined it. Yet the next morning, Lyra looked tired. Her eyes had dark circles. She smiled faintly and said, "I heard you dream loudly." Daniel laughed nervously. "I didn't know I talked in my sleep." "You don't talk," she said. "You breathe stories. Humans do not know how strong their dreams are." Her words confused him, but he let it go. He thought she was being poetic. Still, as days passed, that one line kept echoing in his mind. Humans breathe stories. He didn't realize it yet. But this small, calm beginning, the quiet talks, the soft curiosity, the gentle oddities were only the surface of something deeper. Something that would soon test his understanding of trust, fear, and what it truly meant to share space with someone not quite human, yet not entirely alien either. Part 2. Cultural Differences. Weeks slowly passed, and Daniel began to understand that living with Lyra was like living with a quiet mystery. She was gentle and polite, but everything she did seemed to follow a logic he couldn't fully grasp. At first he thought it was just because she was new to Earth, but the more time he spent with her, the more he realized she was not only learning about humans, and she was trying to feel what it meant to be one. She studied small things. The way people waved to each other across the street, the way laughter could change a room, the way silence felt different depending on who stood beside you. To Daniel, these things were normal and invisible, but for Lyra, each was something to understand. Sometimes she would sit at the table with a cup of tea, her silver eyes watching the steam rise. Then she would ask the strangest questions. Why do humans smile when they are sad? Daniel didn't know how to answer. Maybe we don't want others to worry. She wrote it down in her notebook and looked thoughtful. "On my world," she said softly, "we share sadness so it becomes smaller." He didn't know what she meant, but her words stayed in his heart. Life with Lyra taught Daniel patience. She didn't rush through days. She observed every sound, every smell, every change in the light. When he played music, she listened without moving, as if the melody was something sacred. One evening, Daniel was cooking dinner when he noticed her standing near the kitchen window. She was touching the glass lightly, tracing her fingers over the raindrops outside. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Learning how the air feels when it becomes water," she replied simply. Daniel smiled. "You don't have to study everything, you know." "But I want to," she said, turning to him. "Every small thing you forget to notice, that is what I came to learn." There was no pride in her voice, only gentle honesty. It made Daniel realize how blind people could be to their own world. Over the next few days, they began to talk more. Lyra told him about her home, a quiet place under twin suns where buildings were made of glass that sang in the wind. There were no cities like Earth's, only wide open fields where her people shared thoughts through touch and sound. "We do not have many words," she explained. "We share feelings. Words are heavy for us." Daniel listened closely. He found it hard to imagine a world like that. Then one night, while they were having tea, she asked him if humans ever shared feelings without speaking. He thought for a moment. "Maybe through music, or when we just sit with someone and don't need to talk." She smiled faintly. "Yes, that is close." That was when Daniel began to notice her watching him more carefully. Not in a strange way, but with soft curiosity, like she was trying to read his thoughts through his face. He didn't mind it. In fact, it made him aware of his own emotions. but sometimes her actions still confused him. One evening, Daniel came home tired from work. He dropped his bag and sat on the couch. Lyra was already there, sitting cross-legged, eyes closed. She was humming softly on a calm, deep tone that filled the room. He asked, "Are you meditating again?" She nodded without opening her eyes. "It helps me stay balanced in your atmosphere. The energy here feels heavy." He didn't really understand, but the sound she made was peaceful. He leaned back and listened until he drifted to sleep right there on the couch. When he woke up, Lyra was still sitting there, watching the candlelight flicker. She didn't say a word. For a moment, Daniel wondered if she ever truly slept. The next morning, during breakfast, she surprised him by asking, "Why do humans sleep so long?" He laughed a little. "Because we get tired." "Do you rest only your body?" she asked, "or your heart too?" Daniel looked at her, unsure what to say. "Maybe both," he said at last. She nodded slowly, as if that answer carried more meaning than he realized. There were other small moments that made him wonder how she saw the world. She never shook hands. Instead, she pressed her palm lightly against his wrist. When she greeted neighbors, she bowed instead of waving. When she laughed, it was almost silent, more like a breath of joy than a sound. Sometimes Daniel caught her staring at the sky for hours. Once he asked what she was looking for. "I'm waiting to see if your moon sings," she said quietly. He chuckled. "Our moon doesn't sing." "Maybe not for you," she replied, smiling. Despite her odd ways, she was kind and respectful. She kept the apartment clean, helped with small chores, and never complained. When Daniel was sick one day, she stayed by his side. Making tea and checking his temperature with an old thermometer, she said, reminded her of home. "Thank you," he said, smiling weakly. "You help me understand this world," she answered softly. "It is fair I help you stay in it." Her kindness made him see her differently. She wasn't just a visitor. She was a person with feelings, fears, and hopes. But not everything was easy. Their differences sometimes caused confusion. One night, Daniel found her standing in the hallway, staring at his closed bedroom door. "Lyra," he said gently, "is everything okay?" She turned toward him, her silver eyes reflecting the hallway light. "I could hear you dreaming," she said quietly. It sounded heavy. Daniel smiled awkwardly. "You can hear that?" She nodded. "Dreams have a sound. I cannot explain it in words." He didn't know how to respond. He simply said, "I'm fine. Just a long day." She nodded again and went back to her room without another word. That night, Daniel lay awake thinking about her. He realized how alone she must feel, far from her home, surrounded by people who didn't understand her way of sensing the world. He felt a quiet sympathy, a need to protect her even though she didn't seem fragile. The next morning, Lyra looked brighter, almost cheerful. She thanked him for being patient with her strange ways. "Most humans," she said, "become afraid when they do not understand." "You do not," Daniel smiled. "I guess I'm learning too." They both laughed softly, and for a moment it felt like they weren't so different after all. As days turned into nights, their friendship grew in quiet ways. She began to tell him small stories from her childhood, about glowing plants that hummed when touched, about gentle winds that carried music, and about how her people learned to share dreams to heal sadness. Daniel listened with wonder. Her world sounded peaceful and pure, untouched by the rush and noise of Earth. But he could also sense that she missed it deeply. He wanted to ask more, but something in her expression told him that not all her memories were happy, so he stayed silent and let her talk when she wished. That night, after they said goodnight, Daniel stood by his window, thinking about everything he had learned. He realized that maybe the word alien didn't mean strange. Maybe it just meant someone who sees the world differently. And yet, something inside him sensed that this peaceful balance between them would not last forever. There was something unspoken in Lyra's eyes lately, something she wanted to ask but didn't say. The night was calm. A soft wind moved through the small gap in Daniel's window, carrying the faint smell of rain. The city outside was almost silent except for the distant hum of cars. Daniel had gone to bed late, tired after a long day at work. Lyra had spent most of the evening reading quietly by the lamp in the living room. Everything felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. Sometime after midnight, Daniel turned in his sleep. He dreamed of strange lights and distant voices, things that faded as soon as he tried to remember them. Then a feeling of weight pressed gently on his chest. At first he thought he was still dreaming. The air felt warmer, and a quiet sound, like slow breathing, filled the room. When he opened his eyes, the dim light from the street touched the outline of a figure leaning over him. It was Lyra. Her silver eyes glimmered faintly, catching the faint glow. She wasn't doing anything harmful. She was only looking at him with a calm, curious expression, her hands resting lightly near his shoulders. Daniel froze, his heart beating fast. "Lyra?" he whispered, his voice weak with surprise. She didn't move away. Instead, she spoke in her soft voice, careful and quiet. "Please don't be afraid. I mean no harm." He blinked, trying to wake his mind. What are you doing here?" Lyra lowered her gaze as if she felt ashamed. "I could hear your dreaming again," she said. It sounded heavy, full of noise. I wanted to understand it. On my world, we can learn a person's feelings through closeness. We listen to the rhythm of their breathing while they rest. Daniel sat up slowly. The fear in his chest turned into confusion. Her words didn't sound threatening, they sounded innocent, maybe even desperate. "You shouldn't come into my room while I'm asleep," he said softly, not wanting to scare her. Lyra nodded quickly, her hands clasped together. "I know, I am sorry. I broke your comfort, but I did not wish to harm. I only wished to feel what humans feel in their sleep." For a moment they both sat in silence. The air between them felt fragile, like a thread that could break with a single wrong word. Daniel looked at her carefully. Her silver eyes shimmered with worry, not pride. She seemed frightened, but not of him, of something inside herself. He sighed quietly. "You could have asked," he said gently. "I was afraid you would say no," she whispered. "And I needed to know if what I read in your books is true. That dreams show the heart." Her voice trembled slightly. Daniel felt the tension fade from his body. He couldn't stay angry. He could see that her action came from curiosity and loneliness, not from bad intent. "Next time," he said, "you ask first." "Okay," she nodded quickly. "Yes, I will ask." Then she stepped back, keeping her eyes low. "I did not wish to frighten you." "It's okay," Daniel said. "I was just surprised." Lyra gave a small apologetic smile, then quietly left the room. Daniel lay awake for a long time afterward, staring at the ceiling. The moment had felt strange, but not dangerous. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about her words, about listening to someone's dreaming. It was such an unusual idea, yet somehow beautiful in its own way. The next morning, the air felt tense between them. Lyra stayed in her room longer than usual. When she came out, she looked tired. She avoided eye contact, keeping her tone quiet and respectful. Daniel tried to act normal. He made breakfast, poured 2 cups of coffee, and offered her one. "You can relax," he said kindly. "I'm not upset." She nodded slowly and took the cup. "I should not have entered your space. Where I come from, closeness during sleep is trust. I forgot that humans need distance." Daniel smiled faintly. "We do, but we also understand mistakes." That made her smile just a little. "Thank you," she said. After that night, Lyra seemed more careful. She moved quietly around the apartment, making sure to give Daniel space. But sometimes Daniel caught her glancing at him when she thought he wasn't looking. It wasn't fear in her eyes. It was something like guilt mixed with curiosity. Days passed, and the strange incident slowly became just a memory, though one that never left Daniel's mind. Still, something between them had changed. Their conversations grew deeper. One evening, they sat on the balcony watching the sunset. The sky burned orange and pink above the rooftops. Lyra leaned against the railing and said, "Your world changes color every night." "It feels alive," Daniel nodded. "I guess we take it for granted." She turned toward him. "You should not. Where I am from, the sky stays the same all year. When I see this, I feel something warm inside. I think you call it comfort." Her words touched him. "I'm glad you feel that here," he said. Lyra smiled gently. "It is because you do not treat me like a visitor. You speak to me as if I belong." Daniel looked at her quietly. "You do belong here, at least in this home." Her eyes softened. She looked down at her hands and said, "Then I must keep that safe." That night, Daniel couldn't sleep again. Not because of fear this time, but because his thoughts kept circling back to Lyra. She was so calm, yet full of mystery. There was something deep and pure in the way she saw life. When he finally began to drift into sleep, he heard a faint sound, a gentle humming from the living room. It was Lyra again. Her voice was soft and low, singing a tune that didn't belong to Earth. The melody was slow and peaceful, and it filled the apartment with a kind warmth. Daniel didn't get up. He just listened. The song made him feel calm, like the air itself was wrapping him in comfort. Before long, he fell asleep to her voice. The next morning, he found her sitting by the window with her notebook open. "That song last night," he said. "It was beautiful." She looked surprised. "You heard it?" "I did," he said with a smile. "It helped me sleep." Lyra smiled softly, looking a little shy. "It is a song from home. We use it to guide dreams toward peace." "That explains a lot," Daniel said gently. "You don't need to sneak into rooms anymore. Just sing that song, it works better." Lyra laughed quietly. It was the first time he had heard her laugh freely, without restraint. The sound made the morning brighter. After breakfast, she said something that made him pause. "There is one thing I wish to ask," she said carefully. "Would you allow me to stay near while you rest again, but only beside, not touching, so I can learn the rhythm of calm dreams? I will not move closer than the chair." Daniel hesitated. He looked at her serious face, her calm eyes that carried no harm. He realized she truly wanted to understand, not to invade his privacy. "All right," he said after a moment. "As long as you promise to stay in the chair." She nodded deeply. "I promise." That night, he found her sitting quietly near his bed before he slept. She closed her eyes and hummed softly, no closer than she had said. Daniel didn't feel uneasy anymore. The air in the room felt light, like something invisible had settled in peace. Before he fell asleep, he thought to himself that maybe this strange friendship wasn't strange at all. Maybe it was something rare. Two beings from different worlds learning how to trust through silence, patience and understanding. And though he didn't know it yet, that small promise between them to stay near, not too close, would soon lead to something even deeper. Something that would change how both of them understood the meaning of connection. The days after that night felt peaceful again. Lyra kept her promise. She never entered Daniel's room without permission. Every evening she would bring her small notebook and sit quietly in the chair near the window while he prepared for bed. She called it her study of calm. Her presence no longer made Daniel uneasy. Instead, it gave the room a sense of quiet comfort, like the soft hum of rain outside. One evening, as Daniel turned off the lights, he noticed Lyra sitting by the lamp, her hands folded neatly on her lap. The silver glow in her eyes looked softer than before, almost warm. "You can turn off the lamp if it's too bright," he said kindly. She shook her head. "Light helps me follow your breathing. It tells me when peace begins." Daniel smiled and lay down. "Then I guess it stays on." She smiled too, that small, careful smile of hers, and opened her notebook. For a long time, there was only silence between them, broken only by the quiet sound of her writing and the slow rhythm of his breathing. That night, Daniel slept easily. When he woke in the morning, Lyra was gone from the chair, but a small note rested on the table. It read, "I learned your calm last night. Thank you for letting me listen." The note made him smile. Her words were simple, but they carried a strange beauty. Later that day, when Daniel came home from work, he found Lyra cooking something that smelled faintly sweet. "What's that?" he asked. "Something from home," she said. "We make it to thank someone who shares kindness." She handed him a small bowl. The dish was warm and soft, with a taste like honey mixed with flowers. Daniel didn't know how to describe it, but it made him feel at peace. After dinner, Lyra sat near the window again. The sky outside was painted orange and gold as the sun went down. "I think I begin to understand humans," she said quietly. "How so?" Daniel asked. "You live with feelings that never stop moving. Sadness and joy walk together. Fear and trust share the same path. On my world, we try to keep them apart. But you let them meet," Daniel nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why life feels so full. Even small things mean more when they sit beside sadness." Lyra smiled faintly. "Yes, that is the part I did not know." Her voice held a quiet wonder, like a child discovering something precious. For a few nights after that, things stayed gentle. But one evening, Lyra looked more thoughtful than usual. She sat at the table while Daniel washed the dishes. When he turned around, he saw her staring at her hands, lost in deep thought. "Is something wrong?" he asked. She lifted her head slowly. "Daniel, may I ask something?" "Different?" Her tone was serious, almost careful. "Of course," he said. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. In my world, when we wish to understand trust, we sit beside someone during their rest, not just to listen but to share calm. It helps us learn the other's rhythm fully. I wish to ask if you will allow this, only beside, nothing more. I want to understand how humans keep peace inside when their hearts carry noise. Daniel looked at her quietly. The request sounded unusual but not dangerous. She had always been gentle, never crossing a line since that night. Her eyes held no pressure, only hope. You mean, you just want to sit next to me while I sleep? He asked softly. She nodded. Yes, I promise not to touch or move close. Just to feel the quiet. My people say it helps us learn trust beyond words. He thought about it for a moment. It still felt strange, but somehow after all the time they had spent together, he trusted her. Lyra had never done anything unkind. If this would help her understand his world better, maybe it was worth it. All right, he said finally. But you promise, just sit beside, nothing else. She smiled, relief in her eyes. I promise. That night, Daniel lay down as usual. Lyra took a seat on the edge of the bed, keeping her distance. She sat perfectly still, her hands resting on her knees. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock and the sound of their breathing. At first, Daniel felt nervous. But as minutes passed, the calm energy that always seemed to follow Lyra filled the room. It was like invisible warmth spreading through the air. Soon, his eyes grew heavy. When he opened them again, morning sunlight touched the curtains. Lyra was gone, but her notebook was open on the table. On the page were words written in neat lines. When humans sleep, their calm spreads like light. I understand now why you dream with such heart. Daniel read the note twice, unsure why it made his chest feel warm. Her words carried a kind of kindness he had rarely seen. That evening, when he came home, Lyra was sitting quietly, looking out the window. She turned as he entered. You slept peacefully, she said softly. Thank you for trusting me, Daniel smiled. You're welcome. They spent the evening talking. Lyra asked about his past, his childhood, his family, the things he missed most. Daniel told her about growing up in a small town, about fishing trips with his father, and how he used to count stars on the roof at night. Lyra listened without interrupting, her silver eyes bright with attention. After he finished, she said, You remember your world with warmth. That is a rare gift, and what about you? He asked gently. What do you remember most about your home? Her smile faded slightly. The quiet, she said, and the way people shared silence together. Here I am learning that silence can be shared even without touching. That is new for me. Daniel nodded, feeling the weight of her loneliness. You're doing well here, he said kindly. And you're not alone. Her expression softened. Thank you. Those words mean much more than you think. That night, as Daniel prepared for bed, Lyra came to the doorway. May I sit beside again tonight? She asked quietly. He nodded. Of course. When he lay down, she sat near him just as before, calm and still. The light from the street outside painted soft shapes on the wall. Daniel felt her presence, steady and peaceful. Before his eyes closed, he whispered, Does this help you understand humans? Lyra's voice was a whisper in the dark. Yes, you carry warmth even when asleep. It feels like home. Daniel smiled faintly as sleep pulled him away. That night, his dreams were gentle. He dreamed of rain and stars, of strange skies that glowed silver, and of someone sitting quietly beside him, guarding the calm between worlds. When he woke in the morning, the chair was empty again, but he could still feel that same quiet peace in the room. Something between them had changed, not in a way that could be seen, but in a way that could be felt. A bridge of trust had formed, built not by words or promises, but by silence and understanding. Lyra no longer seemed like a guest. She seemed like part of the home itself, an echo of calm that would stay even after she left. And though Daniel didn't yet know it, her time with him was nearing its turning point. Part 5. What he learned. Morning sunlight touched the small apartment, painting the floor with soft golden lines. Daniel woke to the gentle warmth of the light, feeling a calm peace in his chest. The quiet of the room felt different now, and not empty but alive. Lyra was already awake, sitting near the window as always, her notebook open on her knees. Good morning, Daniel said softly. She turned and smiled. Good morning. I was watching the sunrise. It is brighter than the ones on my world. Daniel rubbed his eyes and smiled back. I guess we take it for granted. You should not, she replied kindly. It is a gift. He nodded, noticing the soft way she said it, like someone who had learned to see the beauty in small things. They had fallen into a comfortable rhythm now. Each morning began with quiet greetings, tea and short talks that somehow carried meaning far beyond the words spoken. But this morning felt slightly different. There was something in Lyra's eyes, a stillness like she was holding back something important. As Daniel poured tea, he asked, "You seem quiet today. Is something on your mind?" She hesitated before answering. "Yes, I must tell you something soon. But first I wish to thank you." "For what?" he asked gently. "For allowing me to learn peace," she said. "When I first came here, I thought humans were full of noise, too fast, too busy, always chasing. But I was wrong. I learned that quiet can live even inside a moving world." "You showed me that," Daniel smiled. "You showed me a lot too, you know. I never noticed how simple moments could hold meaning until you pointed them out." Lyra looked down, tracing her finger along the rim of her cup. "That makes me happy." The rest of the day passed quietly. Daniel went to work and Lyra spent her time reading, writing, and watering the small plants by the window. When he returned that evening, he found her standing on the balcony, looking at the stars just beginning to appear. "They look different here," she said when he joined her. "Smaller but brighter." "On my world, the sky sings when the stars come out," Daniel smiled softly. "If you listen long enough here, you might hear the same song." Lyra turned toward him with a faint, thoughtful smile. "Maybe I already do." After dinner, they sat together in the living room. The lamp cast a soft glow over the table, and the ticking of the clock filled the silence between them. Daniel could tell she was building up courage to say something. "Lyra," he said gently, "what did you want to tell me earlier?" She took a deep breath, her hands folding in her lap. "My time here is ending soon. The program is finishing. I must return to my world next week." Daniel froze. The words hit him harder than he expected. He had known she couldn't stay forever, yet hearing it felt like a small piece of quiet breaking inside him. "Oh," he said softly. "I see." Lyra looked at him carefully. "Does this make you sad?" He hesitated. "A little," he admitted. "You've become part of this home. It won't feel the same without you," she smiled gently. "That means I have done something right. To be remembered kindly is a good end." Daniel looked at her silver eyes glowing softly in the lamplight. "You'll be remembered more than kindly," he said quietly. "You'll be missed?" For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet stretched like a warm blanket across the room. Finally, Lyra opened her notebook and turned it toward him. On the page was a short message written in her careful handwriting. "Humans share peace through presence. Trust grows in silence. I came to study you, but I found a friend." Daniel read the words slowly, his chest tight with emotion. "That's beautiful," he said softly. "It is true," she replied. "When I return home, I will teach my people that humans are not what they think. Not lost in chaos, not cold. You hold warmth in your hearts that even silence can feel." Daniel looked at her speechless. He felt both proud and sad at the same time. That night, she asked one final request. "May I sit beside you one last time while you rest?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, of course." The night was calm and quiet. The soft hum of the city faded into the background as Daniel lay down. Lyra sat beside him, her hands folded gently on her knees. She didn't speak. She simply sat there still and peaceful, her presence filling the room with calm. After some time, she began to hum the gentle tune from her world, the same one he had heard before. The melody flowed through the air like a soft breeze. Daniel closed his eyes and let the sound carry him toward sleep. In his dreams, he saw a sky with two suns, glowing fields of silver light, and a calm voice whispering, "Thank you for the peace." When he woke in the morning, she was still sitting beside him, watching the sunlight fill the room. Her expression was soft, peaceful, and full of quiet understanding. "You slept well," she said. "I did," he replied. "Your song works better than any dream." She smiled. "Then my learning is complete." That day passed slowly. Daniel went through his work with a heavy heart, knowing soon she would leave. When he came home in the evening, he found a small gift waiting on the table, a tiny glass sphere that shimmered with faint light. There was a note beside it that read, "This holds a memory of calm. When you feel alone, let it remind you that trust once lived here." He held the small sphere carefully in his hands. It was smooth and warm, like it carried a heartbeat inside. The next morning, she stood at the door with her bag. The transport shuttle would arrive soon. Daniel walked her to the street. Neither of them said much. The air felt heavy with words left unspoken. Before she stepped away, Lyra turned and looked at him one last time. "I will remember this place," she said softly. "And I will remember you as the first human who made silence feel safe." Daniel smiled faintly. "And I'll remember you as the first visitor who taught me how to listen." She bowed her head, the silver light in her eyes shining like dawn. Then she walked toward the waiting car, her figure growing smaller until it disappeared into the brightness of the morning. When Daniel returned to his apartment, the space felt different, not empty, but filled with quiet memories. The chair near his bed, the notebook on the shelf, the small plants by the window, each held a trace of her calm. He placed the glowing glass sphere on the windowsill. As the sunlight touched it, it shimmered softly, filling the room with gentle light. Daniel sat down and smiled. He realized that Lyra had left him more than just a memory. She had changed the way he saw life. He had learned that peace didn't come from being alone. It came from understanding, from sharing space without fear, from listening to the quiet between words. That night, as he looked out at the stars, he thought he heard a faint hum. Soft, distant, familiar. Maybe it was just the wind. Or maybe, somewhere far away, Lyra was looking at the same stars, remembering the small home on Earth where silence had found its meaning. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel felt completely at peace.